campaigning um, and energy justice. And what emerged from that was that one of the main things that emerged from that was a concern about the growing narrative that we're hearing from far right groups, from Reform in particular, that climate action is an expensive imposition on working class people, ranging from climate change denial completely to an argument that it's just too expensive and we can't, net zero's a scam and all the rest of it. And of course, in the way that it's being enacted, they're quite right, because billions of pounds of public money are being, in the form of direct subsidies and in the form of and through our energy bills, are being paid to fossil fuel companies to implement ineffective solutions like carbon capture. And in the meantime, ordinary people on low and medium incomes are footing the bill. So, it's all playing into this kind of narrative that we can't afford climate action. So what we really seriously need is climate action that is effective in terms of cutting emissions, but also equitable, that redistributive, that benefits people on low incomes and average incomes and brings us all a better quality of life. So in this case, this would be about helping people to shift from car travel to public transport, and also helping people who walk and cycle as well, because we're reducing pollution on the roads. Cutting pollution from surface road transport is the single biggest thing we can do to cut greenhouse gas emissions. In 2022, road transport was responsible for 27% of UK greenhouse gas emissions. And we don't get rid of all of them by switching to public transport. It's probably the single biggest thing that we can do. And of course, if we're looking at what are called the co-benefits, cutting road transport would save thousands of lives every year, in terms of the circulatory and respiratory diseases that are caused by road traffic pollution. We know that there are a huge number of excess deaths, largely amongst older people, but as we all know, there have been children that have died too as a result of road traffic pollution in their neighbourhoods. What I really want to raise in particular is that this is very much a workplace issue. And it's important to frame it as a workplace issue, because we're not really going to progress unless we get this taken on board by the trade unions generally. And I would argue that it's a workplace issue, obviously for people who work in the transport sector, in the public transport sector, massively an issue for them, and that we formulate our campaign in a way that prioritises working conditions and pay for those workers, but also for all of us, because almost all workers have to commute, some or all of the time. If they walk, if they cycle, they're subjected to higher levels of road traffic pollution. If they drive a car, they're probably stuck in traffic jams for many hours every week. That's their time. It's part of their working day, but it's part of their working day that it's essential, but it's not paid for. So they're giving their own time for free to get to work, and also, well, not just for free, but actually also paying for it. So in that sense, it's a health and safety issue for workers in terms of the pollution that they're exposed to in having to travel to work. But it's also an issue. It's also a pay issue in terms of the free time that people put into doing that commute. So, and obviously, if people have access to free transport, that raises the value of their wage in effect. So it needs to be a trade union issue as well as a community issue. But of course, I do want to stress that we don't think that free public transport is going to solve all the problems of traffic pollution, congestion, and the rest of it. it's not enough. Obviously, it has to sit alongside a whole series of other demands to do with accessibility, to do with the kinds of comprehensive routes that we want, to do with democratizing the system so that service users and workers actually get a proper say in the way that public transport's run, and clearly to be environmentally sustainable. So I'm exactly on my scheduled 10 minutes. I'm going to now, thank you. I'm going to bring in the first of our speakers, which is Matthew Topham, who until recently was working for We Own It, which is an organisation that campaigns for public ownership in a whole range of different sectors, but specifically here we're talking about, of course, about public transport. Fantastically well, Brannon coordinated the Better Buses campaign, which is just going to tell us about now by way of introduction to this whole discussion. Thanks, Matthew. Off you go.
Thanks so much, Ellen, for that fantastic introduction. And it's all for me to mess up now on the timings, because you've got us straight on track with the timing so far. Thanks so much for having me along to speak. That will occasionally happen. Apologies. Let's see. Yeah, the technology's working again. You got a quick glance from my other webcam of the Better Buses for North Yorkshire t-shirt that I'm wearing. So great product placement there. But I'll just quickly run through the campaigning that we did under a number of Better Buses banners. Folks will, I've already seen from the chat, are involved in different bus campaigns from across the region already. I'll briefly mention, before we start talking about the campaigning that's happened more recently, that way back in the 1980s, there was a policy of cheap fares in South Yorkshire in particular, and the nature of freezing the fares that they did there meant that eventually we would have expected buses to be run for free in South Yorkshire if we hadn't seen Margaret Thatcher change the rules around how public services were funded locally. I'll share a blog very quickly in the chat there if people wanted to find out more about that, because it is part of Yorkshire's history to have cheap and moving towards free fares. But more recently, in 2019, the Yorkshire TUC started convening a broad Yorkshire-wide campaign to put demands on local authorities to use new powers they'd been given under the Conservative government from a Bus Services Act to roll back the extreme form of privatisation that we had in Yorkshire and indeed across all of the country outside London, where there was a Wild West system. Any private company could do effectively what they liked. At the start of the campaign, local politicians were not interested in rolling that back and moving towards this London-style system of integrated, publicly controlled bus services. In public, they would give some warm words, but in private meetings with the campaign, they pretty much openly ridiculed the idea that public control would work. They said we needed better private sector solutions like Uber for buses, or suggesting that we could just buy back companies outright without accepting that you can't operate a publicly owned operator very effectively in a Wild West free market system. You need that level of public integration, public control. As it became clear that West Yorkshire would get a mayor, the Yorkshire TUC focused on a Better Buses for West Yorkshire campaign, asking that new mayor to use eventually her powers to take buses back into public control. Started by launching a petition there, targeting the mayor and council leaders, which over 5 years grew to 12,000 signatures, thanks to work from lots of people on this call. So thank you to all the people who were involved. And of course, this campaign was running alongside lots of other work going on around public transport in the region. During the mayoral election, we focused on making public control one of the top issues in that election. The TUC and others did that by finding passengers to speak to the local press, because that's such a great way to get politicians to take notice of our issues. Organised a public reverse town hall where over 100 people in the region came together, and rather than having the politicians tell us their policies about buses, we told them our experiences on the buses and what we wanted them to do, which was commit to starting a process of public control in their first 100 days. That was then very successful, became part of the BBC's coverage of the issue, got the mayor, who was elected, Tracy Braben, to commit to doing it, and we held her to doing it within, or starting the process in the first 100 days. It took several years to complete and lots of further work. I'll quickly mention a smaller part of the work that campaign did, which was in our attempt to find ways to keep the pressure up to make sure the mayor delivered a system of public control. We asked that she make buses free for all of COP26. Now, I can't remember what year that was, probably 2021, maybe 2022, so a while ago now, to show her commitment to the climate transition. We set up a small email action, which 300 people did. They emailed the mayor to say, can you make buses free for the whole period? She didn't do it for the whole period, but unlike our other targets across Yorkshire, because we emailed all of the leaders in Yorkshire, she did give us a single fare free day during COP26, which actually the policy work that went on behind that to make that happen, I think enabled her to introduce her mayor's fares, capping the cost of a single at £2 and now £2.50, and capping the day rider tickets as well, which not only as a policy has been very good in our region, but was adopted first by Greater Manchester, then by the West Midlands, and then by the National Conservative government. So there is a way in which the campaigning people have already wanted to do on fares in Yorkshire has set the standard elsewhere. So a little bit over time, and possibly having garbled lots of that, but I hope it's a useful starting point for where we've been. I'll hand back, Ellen, to you.
I think that's great, Matthew. You've said a lot, but I think it's, this is all stuff that we can look back over that will help us in our future discussions about tactics and strategies. So I'm going to pass straight on to Sandra Wyman, who's another fantastic campaigner representing Leeds DPAC, which stands for Disabled People Against Cuts. As you probably know, embroiled in a massive struggle over disability benefits at the minute, but finding time to come and talk to us about accessibility in public transport. Over to you, Sandra.
Right, thank you, Ellen. Yes, I'm actually DPAC admin. I'm also a Unite community member, and all my sins, I'm also a disability labour officer, national officer. But I think also very importantly, I'm a committee member of an organisation called Act for Inclusion, which campaigns on transforming social care and support and working to find ways of supporting disabled people. And transport is one of the things that obviously is very important to us. I'd just like to start with, if you like, a bit of a battle cry. Very often people think of things like accessibility and inclusion as something that you add on, a sort of an extra. And to my mind, it's not an extra. It's absolutely central. It's not a favour we get from organisations. It's a right we should be having without having to ask for it. In legal terms, there are two bits of law that are actually important. One is the Equality Act 2010, which is designed to protect people with protected characteristics from discrimination and any form of unfair treatment, including public services. There's a particular requirement in addition to ensure the needs of disabled people are met, even if, and this is important, even if it means treating disabled people more favourably. And this is really a kind of compensation for the fact that we have been treated abominably by the current social system that we find ourselves in. The other is the Public Service Vehicle Accessibility Regulations, also 2010, designed to ensure disabled people have access to travel on trains, buses and taxis. Specifically relates to issues like wheelchair access, wheelchair users being able to access buses safely, and that safely is very important. People with sensory impairments such as sight and hearing are able to access the information that they need to travel. There have been improvements been made in providing ramps, a majority of buses now having low floors, and some bus companies providing visual and audio information. But because it's all piecemeal, because you've got different bus companies doing different things, there's no universal standard. Some bus companies are good at some things, some bus companies are good at other things, but there's not an overall good standard of accessibility. When I spoke at a conference in York in 2023, Better Buses and National Pensioners Convention, people there told horrifying stories of the inequalities that they'd faced in various parts of the country. So, right, wheelchairs. Most bus companies, one wheelchair space shared with pushchair space. Sorry, my keys are coming loose. Pushchair space or pram space. And this has led to huge problems because obviously there are going to be arguments between people who think they have a right to a pushchair space and people who actually do literally have more of a right to a wheelchair space. And it puts, and this is one of the problems with accessibility, is it puts bus drivers in a really difficult position because they have been ordered not to. They've been ordered to try and emphasize the fact wheelchair users have priority, but they're not to put themselves in any danger. And that applies to a whole lot of other things, and I'll come back to that later. There's no formal support for parents. I mean, it's not just accessibility for disabled people. There's no formal support for parents with children, pushchairs, prams, loads of shopping. I'm sure anybody who's had to go shopping with children will know exactly what I'm talking about, because it really can be very difficult. Wheelchair users find the spaces are already full. If you've got two friends or partners travelling together, both wheelchair users, then they've no chance, because apart from in a few places, I think it happens in Greater Manchester, there might be two spaces if you're lucky, but mostly there's just one space. And I know, for example, a couple of friends of mine live in Reading, where the local bus will let them travel together, but it's actually, they know that they're encountering dangers and they have to trust the friendly driver, and there are some, to actually drive very carefully to ensure that they are relatively safe.
Sandra, yes, you're out of time, really.
Right, okay, so there are also problems with ramps.
I think we can come back to a lot of this, hopefully, in the
Can I just come back to one thing? Sure. Because there are all sorts of areas. Drivers don't understand things like autism, for example, and autistic people may find themselves, freaking out just simply because the situation they're in with no support and maybe hostile reactions. But the other issue is safety, and that's safety for personal safety, especially for women travelling at night or anybody travelling at night, for people who may be facing hate crime, on the bus, hate speech, and drivers are required to deal with all of this as well as driving the bus safely, which is totally ridiculous and totally unfair, and I'm sure their pay doesn't actually allow for it. So one of the things that came out of the York conference most strongly, what everybody felt, was what we need is conductors. We need somebody to do the human beings' jobs. And currently, the companies won't take on the extra expenditure, but that's something we need to be campaigning for too. So I'll leave it there. Sorry to have gone on too long, Ellen.
Yes, that's no worries, Sandra. It's such a complicated, we need to spend more time on this, don't we? But I think it'll merit perhaps at some point a meeting on its own and perhaps a working group on its own. We'll see how we go. But I think the point that you've just made about the need for conductors, when I've been out on the street talking to people about accessibility on public transport, conductors have been the first thing that's always mentioned. So, yeah. Whether it's disabled people speaking or whether it's, for any of the other reasons that you've mentioned, really. So let's, Right. Well, we're just nicely timed then. So if we now move on to our main guest speakers, then Ruth and Priyanka, who are going to share this longer slot to give us a presentation about what's happening with the Fare Free London campaign. So thanks very much for coming, and over to you.
Okie doke. So I hope that's can everybody see that? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. So so we're Fare Free London. So the emphasis of our campaign is for free public transport in London, and so that includes the buses, the tubes, and the overground, which are kind of bigger trains, and the bits of the national train system that come under London Transport. London Transport is managed by TfL, Transport for London, which itself is part of the London. Oh gosh. Words are escaping me. Okay, I'll come back to that. But the Mayor of London essentially has control there, so that's easy for our campaign. That's somebody to aim at. So what we stand for is for everybody, free public transport for everybody in London, which opens up the city to everybody, so it gives freedom to everybody in our city. It obviously supports a better climate. It produces less pollution, carbon emissions, as people have talked about already. And for the workers, we fully support well-paid transport jobs. We certainly don't want to see a reduction in transport work because transport is free. So those are our main emphases. I think Priyanka will talk a little bit more about the other issues around. I found it interesting what you were saying about workers as well with transport, and that's some of the experiences that we've been having talking to people. The benefits, I think, again, we've already talked about these quite a lot. There's social equality. If everybody has access to transport, they can move around the city, they can take their kids to museums, they have equal access to shops and other facilities in the city. Mobility should be a right, and definitely, take into account the issues for people with disabilities. I think those are very strong. It's a very strong campaign there as well. Active travelling, again, I think it's been mentioned. It's being encouraged nowadays, I think, by a lot of organisations and bodies. But so by active travelling, we mean rather than just sitting, driving your own little car, getting out there, walking to the buses, walking to the tubes, cycling, all those kinds of physical activity. Because one of the big advantages, I think, of free public transport, it does bring better health to people using the transport. Getting out and about is good for both mental and physical health. I mean, even getting down to the local swimming pool, there's a swimming pool from where I live. It's probably a good 30 or 40 minutes walk. It's a swimming pool that's run by the local authority, so it's cheap for local residents. But to get there, you really need the bus. So to have free buses to get to that kind of function is really useful. Less car use is obvious, less congestion, therefore fewer road accidents, and improvements to environment and air quality. Somebody was mentioning deaths because of poor air quality, and I know there was a fairly recent case in London of a young girl who died, and the coroner did say that her death was caused directly by poor air quality. We would like to see transport as a service in the same way as health and education paid for out of public money. So just as an example about air pollution, this is a slide from Public Health England, and it shows you how air pollution affects us all from the very moment we're born until we come to the ends of our lives. And you can see that what poor pollution causes are health problems. And those health problems, as well as affecting our quality of life, they also mean that we're using the health services more. So it's actually a drain on the economies of our communities as well. So to say that, you know, free fares is just benefiting those people who are using the transport, that's not true. It's affecting a lot of the other costs that we have in our communities. One of the questions that comes up when I'm talking to people is, oh, you know, it'll never happen. It's just pie in the sky. Yeah, it might be good, but, well, actually, it's already happening in a number of other cities around the world. And in fact, it's been happening for a number of years. You know, as an example, in France, these 3 cities have got free fares. Malta has it, Luxembourg. Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia, previously in the Soviet Union, various cities in the United States, and Brazil. Brazil is very interesting, and I'm going to talk about Brazil in a minute. There's a fantastic project in India, in the state of Karnataka. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Since June 2023, they've been offering free bus travel to women, and that has had a huge improvement in their lives. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's not just in other countries. There are examples. It's beginning to happen here. This year in the west of England, children are going to be given free bus travel during summer holidays, which are nearly upon us. There's, if I can just pop over to this site, there's a pilot being planned in the city of Glasgow to offer 1,000 residents for 9 weeks to have free travel as an experiment to see how well it gets taken up. And there is a campaign in Glasgow as well for free transport. So I think this will definitely support that campaign. Let me see if I can come back. Good. Matthew, sorry, was talking about the history of cheap fares leading to free fares in Yorkshire before Thatcher came to power, and I didn't know all of that. That's really interesting, and the fact that the mayor in York is so supportive of improving the cost of travel. That's really good. We have a website, fairfreelondon.org. You can see it here. The landing page is this one, which has got our, we have a petition and a survey and so on. And we have a lot of resources as well. So please do, we're going to be giving you these slides in some form or another after the meeting today. So you'll have all the links here and you can use them for yourselves. Do use any of our resources and do contribute to them if you've got stuff that you think would be useful. So what I was just wanting to show you was that we're beginning to get we've got a spreadsheet which has got information about all the different cities around the world and links to information about them. So do go on there and explore a bit further. I beg your pardon. So let's have a look at some of the other campaigns around the world. What I found really interesting, this just came up last week, is that the mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani, absolutely central to his campaign is to make New York affordable for all its residents. And as a key point in that is to make transport free. I don't think I've got enough time to play you his video. It takes about a minute, but do, when you get these slides, please do have a look at this. It's quite inspiring. And so far he's been successful. He's won the Democratic primary. The elections themselves aren't until November this year, but hopefully it would be amazing if he became mayor of New York, I think, as a counter to some of the pretty awful things that are going on in the States. We've got a case study about Brazil. It's the country with the most number of free fare cities in the world. And an activist, Daniel Santini, he's a researcher at the University of Sao Paulo, and he's been very active in Fare Free London. He's appeared in a couple of our meetings and so on, and we've got his slides which are available on our website as well. Interestingly, last year they had the first international conference on free fares. It was called Free Fares and Health, Emerging Intersectionalities. And that's, you know, key to what we've been talking about. So I've just got some of his slides here. I'll go through very quickly. The interesting thing here is it shows, so in fact, Brazil started having free fare cities in 1992. That's over 30 years ago. But as they had more and more, it really took off. And you can see that in the last few years, over half the cities that are now free fares set up their systems and so on. So that's brilliant. And again, it makes me think here in England, if we can get it going, then it will be like COVID, it'll spread and we'll have loads of free fares all over our country as well. This just shows you where some of the cities are. These are the poorer areas, the areas of higher deprivation in Brazil. You can see, actually, I looked recently, and this has gone up to 137 cities in Brazil, and it's offering over 8 million people, which is about 4% of the population, free fares. This slide, which was from the conference, shows you how because they've been going so long, they really have a lot of statistics, which I think we can all use in our campaigns. And this one shows how free fares actually decreases traffic jams, i.e. it's decreasing traffic itself. And this was a really interesting statistic that due to free buses, people are actually able to get to health facilities more. And so they've seen an increase in people getting better health. So that's or maybe an intended consequence, but it shows how free fares has a much wider impact. This slide I found really interesting as well. It shows that, so the deeper the colour here, the darker the colour, the greater the deprivation in the area. So this area at the bottom is an area of greatest deprivation in Brazil. So and you can see... Why? Sorry? Okay, and it just shows that since free fares have been introduced more and more, the number of bus circuits and bus routes has also increased in this area of deprivation. So that's another advantage. I just finally want to say something about the Indian project that I mentioned earlier. And there was, we have a report, if you go onto the website, the link is at the top there of the whole project. But this really struck me as well when I heard the person speaking about it, that it's allowing women to get out there and work and do household shopping and mix with each other and go where previously it was a male dominated preserve. So it's giving them a sense of independence and a sense of security, and I think that's amazing. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to Priyanka now to finish. I have to stop sharing my screen. Okie doke. And that brings us back. So thank you. Over to Priyanka.
Thanks, Ruth. Are you all, can you all see my screen? Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Priyanka, and I have been part of the Fare Free London organising group since we started in 2024. before that, I think the group was started by a couple of folks who were part of Stop the Silvertown Tunnel campaign. The tunnel has been built, but the campaign is still on at the moment. But some of us came here and we started this group. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the things that we are doing right now. So we're taking an opportunity to talk to at as many conferences and attending other groups. Like we were part of, there was a workshop run by London Mining Network. We were there. And then we met Fuel Poverty Action Group, who are running the Energy for All campaign. And then that led us to running another workshop as part of London Climate Action Week. So we're trying to find opportunities to connect with campaigns, not just in London or conferences around the UK, because we want this to be something that is across the UK. It's not just limiting ourselves to London. One of the key things that we are focusing on is setting up the local groups. And Ruth is part of one of our most active group, which is based in Haringey. And they've been fantastic in running weekly street stalls. And I think that has been a very good opportunity for us as a group to learn about what people are talking on the street, what are the barriers, what are the opportunities. And I think they're there almost every Saturday. So that has been a great learning for us through what people are actually saying. And also, a lot of people are sharing ideas. Like, I remember in one of the last meeting, we spoke about, the bus drivers. They don't like to, if someone gets on the bus who's not paying the fare, they don't want to, stop the bus. It's like putting them in a vulnerable position, as we were discussing earlier as well. So we also run public meetings, and one of the last public meeting we ran last year was very important, where we invited a lot of international speakers, such as Daniel. We learned from Daniel around. He's a fantastic resource, and I think if you do have any other meetings in the future, I would highly recommend inviting him. He's got a lot of details and information about it. We also invited Ellie from the Get Glasgow Moving campaign. So she was there and she shared how they ran during the COP. When the COP was happening in Glasgow, they ran a campaign for free transport. And that's how that got a lot of attention. And then they moved further through that campaign as well. And one of the things we did have recently was meeting with the GLA for the very first time. We wrote to them. And we were very surprised when they said they would like to have a meeting with us. So that was a good, positive start. It was with a non-political officer of the GLA. And I think they did mention that we've missed the election time frame. But they said now what you need is a fundamental shift in how the transport is funded. And you need a lot of political backing, like not just the local backing, but the political backing as well from the central government. But it was a good start. We had the first, it wasn't like the doors were shut. So we would say it was a start of an engagement with them. And then Ruth has already mentioned, there's a lot of resources on the website. Please have a look at that and come to us if you can't find anything or if you have a specific question. I'll move on to the next slide. I'll skip this one because we've gone through this. A couple of comments. We started the Greenwich group in London. They wanted to do a research and they wanted to understand how transport poverty is impacting people. And then we decided as a group that, we should run a survey and reach out to the vulnerable people or people who are facing the real experience of the issues of not being able to travel to drop their kids, or, we've heard really, really sad stories from like mothers who drop their kids, but then they don't have funds to come back on the buses as well. So these are some of the examples and the feedback that we've heard from people. Like, I was refused entry to the bus because I have no money, but dogs go free on the buses. Taking the bus to work takes much longer than the tube, but it's cheaper. And we've discussed bus drivers. They hate having to collect fares. This is a very good point that bus drivers support the campaign as well. And some of the other things, like, you can't afford to take family to museums as well. I think a lot of the time the focus is always on the commuting routes, but also there are so many other journeys that are so relevant for the people who are not actually commuting, but that is so important for them to travel and move around. We're receiving a lot of support from trade unions and other organizations, and some of them we've listed here. There are more in our supporters section you can read about. Doctors and Unite has been supporting, and they're really vocal about the benefits it offer. And I think when Daniel presented in one of our recent presentations, he flagged that there's a recent study that was done in Kansas City in US, where there's a big problem with people, especially the poor people, who don't move at all. Because they had free transport, they were actually walking to the transport, so it was adding that health benefit. And I know I did see Mel, who has joined on the call, and she might be closer to this, that RMT, the RMT union, that individually the people support the motion, but it was rejected at the AGM. And I'm assuming, Mel, you can, if you are on the call, you may be able to cover, or you may be closer to that detail. We can come to that later. That's fine. Yeah. And I'll just cover some bits on the frequently asked questions. One of the key questions that we get is, how is it going to be paid for? And you will hear that all the time, because you're hearing in the news, the government has no money to pay for it. How will we pay for this? So I think there are a couple of options. Our position as a campaign is we are not in favor of this or that. There are multiple options. You can see Transport for Quality of Life created a two-page paper that shows some of the options. It could be, investment. You introduce new progressive taxes, or you remove regressive, damaging subsidies. You can see you can tax the wealth. There are multiple options out there. And I think there is that, it's more about, you need to have that radical thinking and understand the core benefits to be able to pursue those. And just some examples I can share. I think one of the biggest problem with London is that it relies heavily on the revenue fares. Whereas if you see, compared to Paris, for example, they rely less on the fares. So around the world, there are a couple of examples which we can rely on, especially looking at the bigger city models. We need to reduce the reliance on the fares and look at options like, land value capture or road use charges, or, you can reform the council tax or property tax. And the example I was sharing from Paris is the employer's tax. So basically, any employer in the Paris who employs more than 11 people, they pay a tax. And that's 50% of the revenue comes from that. So it's quite interesting to see these different models. And I think our position is not favoring any of it, but we are saying that Sadiq Khan should look and invest time and see what are the right options. And obviously supporting the transport workers' fares, and it has to be a fair option. That has to be critical to this. And the next most frequent comment we get is, as Ruth said, it will never happen, and how can it be achieved? I think,
Priyanka, we are a bit over time at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Do you think we could maybe some of this could actually form part of the Q&A and the discussion?
Absolutely.
Section. I really hate to cut you off, but
it's
we're not going to have enough time. And I did want to just ask whether Mel wanted to come in briefly and just say a little bit from her perspective as a trade unionist. I'm aware, as you said, that the RMT has at the moment voted not to support this campaign on a national basis, but individual trade unionists, of course.
Greetings all. Thank you so much, Ellen, and organisers for inviting me here into this space. I won't be long, but yes, I am unfortunately speaking in a personal capacity. I wish I could say different today, but unfortunately not. And just to actually give more detail, my branch, sorry, I'm Mel Mullings. I'm a train operator for London Underground. I'm also the branch secretary for the Bakerloo Line branch. Our branch is extremely active when it comes to climate justice in our union. Dan Randall is in my branch. He is my chair. And, you know, we do as much as we can to keep our executives' feet to the fire when it comes to climate justice. So, but having said that, it's not just this year. Last year, we asked to back an independent candidate in the parliamentary group for the general elections last year, and the union refused to. So we took it up at a at an appeal at the AGM last year. I was there, and they said, well, we reject it because the candidate backs free travel, and we have a policy against that at the moment. So from last year to this year and many years previous, unfortunately, we haven't been able to sway our executive to go in the direction which we all here, I think, would like to go, which is free public transport. Also, just to say, because I always have to put this in, free public transport, climate justice, as a Black woman, an activist in the trade union space, I would like to also just reach out to my comrades, my allies, everyone here, to make sure that we're opening up this climate change and climate action conversation to our Black colleagues. Racism, misogyny, and all other, you know, the genocide that's happening in Palestine, etc., are all absolutely exceptional issues that we can discuss in the workplace. But climate action affects us greatly, and it's something that we need to keep this conversation very inclusive. And inclusive means including our Black activists within our workplaces, in our communities, even at home. When we're having our barbecues this summer, have that conversation. And I'm just going through my notes because I don't have a lot of time. I just want to get through a few things. And just to reiterate, yes, free transport is a possibility. London is a but not great connected city. Even if I just talk about myself, that's very London centric of me, but here we go. I don't, I am not actually close to an underground station. I will get carpool with my husband sometimes to the bus stop or to the nearest tube station, etc., to get into work. I would love to be able to just hop on a train. So to be clear, I'm on the underground. Even though I've worked for 24 years, I was past 1996, where the travel on the trains was part of the deal that we got. So I don't get free travel on the trains. And as you know, train services can be quite exorbitant in how much it costs. And I would love to sometimes be able to just jump on the train. It's 5 minutes down the road from me and continue my journey. I can't, and this is indicative of a lot of people where I live in Croydon, and some other, and lots of other parts of London. And just like we've said, in the discussion before, other cities have been able to do it. We should be able to do it too. And it's called public transport, but how much of it is owned by the public? So, we need to really think about, bombing our MPs. They work for us. And so, and if you're related to MPs, sorry to have to say it like that. I'm not being disrespectful, but we really do, in this particular government that was supposed to be our hope. I'm no longer a member of the Labour Party. We do need to make sure that they're going in the right direction, because at the moment it seems like a piss poor show of solidarity with working class at the moment from the Labour Party. I wanted to end by saying this is an important part that I will end with this. The UK, just the UK, the small island part of it, not the Scotland and the Ireland part of it, just England alone is responsible for 35% of leaky tax globally, right? That comes to about trillions of pounds. If they were to plug that, that would pay for transport, that would pay reparations to the African people they stole from, that would do so many things, that would do a lot with going forward to the inequality in our society. But what's happening is that all the politicians and their friends get away with absolute murder when it comes to being able to hide their money, hide their wealth, etc., while our climate, our Mother Earth is suffering. So just to say, once again, we can have these conversations in our workplace. I'm happy to be invited to any space where I can come and be a part of the discussion and make our discussions go into actions. So once again, thank you very much, and solidarity to all.
Thanks, Mel. I'm really glad that you managed to make it. And yeah, thanks for inspiring and energizing us all with that. And we certainly will invite you into any future spaces for this conversation. I think it's really good to be reminded of the interconnections between all the different issues and struggles that we're facing, and you know, the way that they all tie into the structural inequalities that you've referred to. Now, we are running a few minutes behind time, so if I can just invite people, if they've got direct questions for any of the speakers, maybe put your hand up, put your electronic hand up if you can, or if you'd rather not actually speak on the screen, you can put a question in the chat. But let's try to keep this section very brief and concise, otherwise people won't have enough time to chat in the breakouts. So are there any directs? Is that Mike? Mike Smith? You'd like to come in? Can you unmute yourself?
Mike, you're muted. We can't hear you at all. Can you unmute yourself? Click on the little red. No.
If you can't unmute yourself, would you like to type something in the chat?
Hey,
yeah, there you are. Yeah.
Yeah, just not so much a question, but perhaps able to answer a few of the points that have been raised. Can I just say that I did contribute to the Clyde Betts bus review in 2019, and I've been a long time campaigner for free public transport. One of the groups that I was in, we had a professor of transport working with us from Leeds University, and we calculated that if you include the subsidies to buses that were currently in place at the time, it would only cost about 1.8 billion a year extra to provide free public transport, public buses for everybody in England. So, I mean, in terms of funding, you know, the Nottingham one is okay, but it's cumbersome, as is the Reading. And I mean, if you go back to London and Merseyside, which both have free public transport from the age of 60, it's a very, under the franchising scheme that they have to operate under, it's still a very expensive option. And I don't know if you're aware, there was a petition calling for everyone in the country to have free public transport from the age of 60. I don't know whether they managed to get to the 100,000 that they required yet. I haven't had time to go back and look at it. So, yeah, Matthew Topham and I have crossed swords before, because he's very much somebody who supports the franchising system, which I believe in West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin is promoting as the way forward. But the problem, as in South Yorkshire, we've also got this franchising scheme being pushed, but it's very, very expensive. The Office of Budget Financial Responsibility, or whatever it's called, has said quite clearly it's cumbersome and it's expensive to actually employ. And I think if you go back, if you've got any contacts with Tracy Brabin, ask her about the cost of it and the implementation, because I believe I've read somewhere she doesn't think it'll be implemented until somewhere like 2040. But with the Labour government that we've got now, they can actually change the law so that we can have full public ownership of the buses within months if they choose to. Under the franchising system, you've got to wait 2 years before you can actually start doing anything. You know, and it brings it back to the idea that it's not only we own it, but we need to control it. Franchising isn't control. And if we want free public transport, starting with the buses, including the trains and so on, it's got to be full public ownership. Sorry, somebody coming in.
I think that it was just somebody being unmuted. But if it's okay to wrap up at that point and just see if anybody else has got any. I mean, those are very interesting points that you're making and useful ones. But I just want to see if anyone else has any questions that they want to ask before we quickly move on to breakout groups. David Bredgewell got a hand?
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually from the pasture rep on the West of England Mirror Combined Authority bus board. So we've actually going for free fares for young people this summer across the West of England Mirror Combined Authority, which is basically Greater Bristol and Bath and North Somerset Council with the West of England to West-Supermare. And also we've brought in a no restriction on disabled travel on our network. So young disabled people or people going to work are now able to use the network for free 24/7. I think one of the interesting points about franchising is actually the structures to do it. It's not easy. We've got a combined authority in Mere, Hell and Goodwin, but you have to have, we don't have preset powers in the West Country, so West of England yet. So obviously you've got to be able to find that money to buy the bus garages, in our cases, from Stagecoach and First Group. So I think franchising is a halfway house, but it's not complete public control of the network. And I think that's what we desperately need to be pushing very hard, making sure that the duties on the local authorities, and as we go towards more mayors across England, which is Labour Party government policy, and I welcome that. We've only got one in the West Country so far, that's Helen in the Greater Bristol area, but we are looking to expand them across Devon and Cornwall and Dorset and Wiltshire, Swindon, where Heidi Alexander's the Secretary of State, and into Gloucestershire. But we do need to get more control over the bus network. It's the biggest amount of public transport that people use. We have got a small rail network, just like Tracy has you have in West Yorkshire. But buses is really where most working class people travel. And I think we really need to push the legislation and push the frameworks, because if Labour's going to show, and I'm a TSA member, show change in 2028, we've got to give hope, and giving hope is to improve the bus networks across England, at least, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland are doing their own thing, and Northern Ireland's already nationalised. So that would be my point. And the other thing is to keep fares low, because people can't afford high fares. Free fares are great, but even just at the moment, we've capped our fares at £2.40 in our area, so we didn't go up to £3. And our mayor did that, and we're obviously trying to keep fares as low as possible on the network and also restore services into our more rural parts of the region.
Oh, thanks, David.
And then the only other point,
can we move through into the breakout rooms, and perhaps you can continue making the point there and perhaps bring it back at the end. I think that might work better, so that we've all got time to chat a little bit. And so Chailey's already started making the breakout rooms. So I just want to quickly say my thinking. Obviously, people will have loads of comments to make, and lots. I probably don't need to tell you what to discuss. But I was thinking that to there's a general question, of course, about to what extent we think this is a good idea and we really want to do a campaign on this. It feels like the mood in the room is that we do, and we do believe it's a good idea, and it needs to happen. And the other point that was in my mind is that we have a lot of unanswered questions as it stands. Some of which the people in London have already made and not just in London, other people on this call have made inroads into answering. But let's have some of those questions to take away with us, so that we can continue researching, that we can continue asking our more experienced comrades in this campaign for answers, and so have an idea what we're going to need to do in order to take things forward. So